All right, today I want to approach things a little bit differently. Most of the time, I talk about current developments in the world of tech, predatory practices in the world of video games or finance, and basically just anything that strikes me as interesting. But today, I want to discuss how brazen the world of Silicon Valley has become as it showcases itself for the dystopian nightmare that it's rapidly devolving into. All over the news cycle right now is a particular advertisement. As you can probably see, thanks to the video title, the advertisement comes courtesy of Apple, and pretty much every single major publication is talking about it. CNN, Time, Associated Press, Sky News, Variety, Forbes, Kotaku, NBC, Marketing Dive, the New York Times, Business Insider, and on and on and on it goes. It's not an exaggeration. Everyone in the world of tech is discussing this, but the question is why? Short answer, it's because the advertisement is a dystopian nightmare that openly disrespects the idea of actual creativity. It's a giant hydraulic press flattening beautiful creative tools like a piano, a guitar, paint sets, sculptures, record players, cameras. It's a pretty big pile of stuff. And crushing it all down to nothing, showcasing their newest and most importantly, thinnest iPad release ever. It's really viscerally disgusting to watch, actually, at least for most people, but I'm not sure everyone entirely understands why, and I'm also not sure how well it's being articulated in a world where the problems that this advertisement accidentally represents are getting bigger by the day. On the surface, mile wide, inch deep puddle type surface, it actually makes sense. Compress a bunch of things that the iPad can supposedly do and create a visual that all of these individual functions are now accessible through a sleek, professional product. It makes sense from a conceptual perspective, it does. And I almost understand why their in house advertising team did it. But if you go like one step further, you realize how terrible it is and how sinister the underlying connotations really are. To understand why, we need to look at pretty much the only article out there that I could find that makes an attempt at defending this advertisement, and then we need to discuss why that defense is completely ass backwards. It's an obscure publication called Campaign, and it's not a very long read, but it tries to reframe the criticism under a different light, presenting a perspective that creatives are defending Apple amid all the backlash. Here's a couple paragraphs that hopefully demonstrate the arguments being used, and then, then we'll talk about why they make no sense whatsoever. Quote, while many advertising creatives are also upset about what they view as a dystopian spin on the future of human creativity, others disagree with the pushback, suggesting that the reaction highlights a lack of understanding of how technology tools in fact power creativity. End quote. Further down, citing Cooper Evoy, I think is how you say that, who is an associate creative director, I guess, at SS&K, which is an advertising/media firm, quote, this feels like people taking out their, in my opinion, extremely justified frustration, fears, and uncertainty about generative AI on an undeserving ad. Because a svelter iPad isn't some Sora-esque harbinger of creative doom. It doesn't do anything Apple hasn't already been doing for decades. My god-awful GarageBand creations from 2005 are proof. Only now it's all, slimmer. This is the message I took from what I think is a fantastically simple spot. All these awesome features crammed into one slim device, end quote. That's basically the argument, but now we need a couple clarifications. First, Sora is a generative AI program aimed at creating short videos. It marks a relatively significant leap in technology from what existed before, namely the jump from static imagery to fully formed videos. But it's also just one more link in the broader chain of generative AI tools. Second, generative AI in totality is always a regurgitation of human creativity that came before it, oftentimes with extremely similar outputs to what exists already, in a way that is directly inferior. Yes, people have differing opinions on this, but we're entering an age now, reaching a sort of inflection point in the process, where the visuals you see online, the text you read, the audio you hear, will be increasingly generated by artificial programs using prior human knowledge to do so. That inflection point separates two very distinctive worlds. On one side is actual creativity, human cognition, emotional influence, even a soul, if you will. But on the other is a hollow, stitched together and reformatted copy pulled together from human creativity that existed before it, but never quite reaching so high as to have creativity itself. Apple's new advertisement very clearly depicts the process by which technology replaces human experience. Instead of physical paints, you have a tiny little screen. Instead of a piano, you have what? An application? Instead of things you used to love with tactile, physical, and emotional value attached to them, you get a thin piece of plastic and metal that fails to achieve even a fraction of the same value as it replaces things in our daily lives that, frankly, do not need to be replaced. Sculpting with clay is not an activity that can be imitated, replicated, or ever replaced by an iPad. It's a shallow and extremely tone-deaf thing to even try to showcase. And yet, there it was in the advertisement, which may have been attempting to communicate that a lot of cool things are contained on this one device, but instead managed to simply demonstrate how aggressive technology has become with regards to replacing and reducing the amount of actual meaningful experience that human beings participate in. Anyway, it's abundantly obvious why the ad sucks, but that one article I found trying to defend it seems to claim that this wasn't an issue of generative AI and that critics had a, quote, lack of understanding of how technology tools in fact power creativity, end quote. This is where we have to go deeper into the inner workings of Apple as a company, because that's where we get the answers on why the advertisement really is one of the worst visual displays in modern memory of a dystopian hellscape future. Remember, the counter argument behind why people are misunderstanding this ad hinges on the idea that Apple is not replacing human creativity with generative AI, but if it were, it would be understandable to hate that, I suppose. Inside Apple's second quarter 2023 earnings call transcript, we find a question from Shannon Cross, who I think was a tech equity researcher at the time, addressed to Tim Cook, who originally posted this ridiculous advertisement in the first place. Quote, I know you used it in different ways, but also if you can just give us any thoughts you have on generative AI, and I don't know where you see it going, not sure what you want to say on it, but I'm really curious for your take, end quote. In response, Tim Cook says, yes, thanks for the question, Shannon. As you know, we don't comment on product roadmaps. I do think it's very important to be deliberate and thoughtful in how you approach these things. And there's a number of issues that need to be sorted, as is being talked about in a number of different places. But the potential is certainly very interesting. And we've obviously made enormous progress integrating AI and machine learning throughout our ecosystem, and we weaved it into products and features for many years, as you probably know. You can see that in things like fall detection and crash detection and ECG. These things are not only great features, they're saving people's lives out there. And so it's absolutely remarkable. And so we view AI as huge and will continue weaving it into our products on a very thoughtful basis, end quote. That's pretty clear. When faced with a question about, in particular, generative AI, Tim Cook says the company will continue weaving it into our products on a very thoughtful basis. And this also is echoed elsewhere by other executives, as reported by Bloomberg, in a piece titled Inside Apple's Big Plan to Bring Generative AI to All Its Devices. The intended message is probably something like, look at all the cool stuff you can do with our product. But the actual message is more like, you don't need any of this old trash anymore, you have our product instead of it. Because they went for destruction rather than integration, and because the company really is embracing technology in the background that will supplant creativity in a horrendous way. It seems like we're smack dab in the middle of what feels to me like a semi-formed cultural awakening right now when it comes to the destructive effects of technology. And Apple chose that concept for an advertisement when people are starting to feel the negative consequences of too much screen time and witness the detrimental downside of children being effectively raised on smartphones. I don't know if they could have possibly come up with a better concept to showcase everything wrong with a technology product, which then got used to try and sell it to people. At first I was thinking this has to be some sort of outside hire consultancy company that did it. But no, it was an in-house production team, which Apple has already, I guess, apologized for, apparently, which makes it even more hilarious. Silicon Valley is actively destroying beauty for profit, and it's not even isolated to any one industry. The aggressive philosophy of number must always go up at these companies has pushed them to embrace tactics that seem antithetical to the very concept of being human. And the latest thing they've latched onto as a stepping stone in that endeavor is technology that melts down, then spits back out mere fragments of original thought, stitched together like some sort of Frankenstein's monster. These tools have a place. Machine learning, generative AI, stuff like that. They do. Honestly, they do. But the idea of advertising something by visually destroying all the things that already feel threatened by its very existence is probably one of the most brain-dead maneuvers an advertising team could possibly make, which obviously resulted in pretty much every single major American publication talking about it, as the tech industry becomes a twisted caricature of itself, scrambling towards profit at the expense of basically every single fundamental human experience. It sounds hyperbolic, but we are cruising for some sort of future where kids don't even know what music from a real guitar sounds like, or the smell of a forest after rain. I hope that doesn't happen, but it kind of feels like it's gonna happen. Anyway, Apple made a terrible ad, one for the history books, honestly, and I wanted to talk about it. If you enjoy the content, feel free to support using the links down below. Locals and Patreon, monthly memberships, that's a great way. Also a sweet VPN deal for anyone who wants one of those. Big discount, use that link, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.